Most people think becoming wealthy is about finding the perfect investment, but real wealth is almost never created by buying the right thing alone. It's created by buying the right thing in the right sequence. Because when you skip steps, your investments stay too small, your risk stays too high, and you spend years working harder just to stay in the same place. So in this video, we're breaking down the exact wealth-building order: what to buy first, second, and third, and the one category of purchases that quietly traps people financially for years. The first purchase is simple: buy time. Because wealth is not built from one lucky decision, it's built from consistent actions repeated for years. And compounding only works when you have uninterrupted time. If your life is overloaded with errands, chores, constant distractions, and random problems, you stay stuck in survival mode. So the first thing you buy is not an investment. You buy back your time. Poor people often spend money trying to look successful. Middle-class people spend money trying to feel comfortable. Wealthy people spend money to create leverage. And time is the first form of leverage, because someone who gets 2 to 3 focused hours every day for 1 year will completely outperform someone who stays constantly distracted for the next 5 years. Now, buying time usually means making small strategic purchases that remove friction from your life. Things like meal prep services, grocery delivery, automatic bill payments, deleting distracting apps, turning off useless notifications, combining errands into one trip, and everything around that idea. Most people call these unnecessary expenses. They're not. This is how you begin reclaiming your hours. Time is the only resource that increases the value of every other resource you have. With 1 free hour a day, you can survive. With 2 hours, you can improve. At 3 hours, you can actually build something meaningful. At 4 or more, you can compound aggressively. So here's the test. If you cannot consistently free up 10 to 15 hours every single week to improve your future, then you don't need a better investment strategy. You need to buy time first. Now, once you get that time back, what should you actually do with it? Purchase number 2 is buying a high-income skill. Because after buying time, you recover the most valuable resource you have: focused attention. And now comes the part most people ignore because it isn't flashy. But before we go further, here's an uncomfortable truth. Investing by itself does not create wealth. It only multiplies wealth. If you don't already have meaningful surplus money, there's almost nothing to multiply. A 10% return on $1,000 is only $100. This is exactly what most people do once they free up extra time. They immediately jump into stocks, crypto, real estate, or passive income ideas, and suddenly all their attention gets wasted chasing investments they realistically shouldn't even be touching yet, at least not at this stage. That's why the second purchase is still not an asset. What you're really buying is income expansion. In other words, you're developing a skill that increases how much money you can produce per hour. And this is one of the biggest reasons most people never become wealthy. They get trapped in what I call the small numbers problem. They try building investment portfolios while earning average salaries, paying rent, and managing everyday life. So their investing looks like $100 here, $200 there, maybe $500 during a strong month. Then they wonder why it feels like nothing is changing. The reality is, the system is working. The numbers are just too small. The real goal is increasing your ability to create surplus capital, because surplus is the only thing that eventually turns into wealth. Which brings us back to the high-income skill itself. So what does buying a high-income skill actually look like? I mean, literally purchasing it. Courses, mentorships, software, tools, better equipment, books, paid projects that force repetition and experience. What you need are repetitions, competence, and real ability. Now, a high-income skill usually has 3 characteristics: First, it's connected directly to revenue. The closer your skill is to generating money, the more valuable it becomes. Sales, media buying, performance marketing, funnel creation, client acquisition, negotiation, and deal-making all sit very close to actual revenue generation. Second, it scales without your hours increasing at the same pace, meaning you're eventually paid more for outcomes than for time spent working. And third, there's continuous demand for it, which brings us to the third purchase. Purchase number 3 is distribution. There are basically two kinds of broke people in the world: people with no useful skills and people with useful skills that nobody knows about. And honestly, the second group is more painful because many of them are actually talented. The hard truth is this: in the real world, talent alone is rarely rewarded. Access is rewarded. Distribution means building a system that consistently brings opportunities to you instead of you forcing opportunities every single day. So what does distribution actually look like in real life? Maybe it's a YouTube channel where new people discover your content daily. Maybe it's a newsletter where trust compounds over time. Maybe it's social media content teaching valuable skills. Maybe even paid advertising sending customers directly into your business funnel. Distribution is simply any system that repeatedly puts the right people in front of you. But here's the key part most people miss. Distribution gives you pricing power. When nobody knows you exist, you take whatever deal you can get because you're scared to lose the opportunity. But once you have distribution, you can charge more because you finally have options. You no longer need every customer, you only need the right customers. Now, once you master those first 3 stages, the rest begins to happen much more naturally. Because after you've built time, a high-income skill, and distribution, you reach a stage most people never reach at all. The point where you can finally make the next major purchase. And honestly, this is probably the perfect moment to mention that we actually built something designed to help people through this exact process. Inside the WealthSphere app, there are daily coaching sessions and expert collections focused specifically on these stages, taught by people who have already built the kind of life you're trying to build yourself. Beyond the lessons, you also gain access to the WealthSphere Network, a curated ecosystem filled with founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and high-net-worth individuals. All right, with that out of the way, let's move into purchase number 4, buying a cash flow machine. A cash flow machine is basically a system that converts your effort into predictable, recurring income. You build it once, then it continues generating money month after month while slowly becoming stronger over time. Now, a cash flow machine can take many different forms, but usually it falls into one of these categories. A productized service like editing, consulting, marketing, or design. An agency with clients paying monthly retainers. A small business selling a real product daily. A digital product solving one painful problem, or even software people pay to access every month. The exact business model matters far less than the rule underneath it, and the rule is simple. You want something stable, repeatable, and predictable. That's exactly why recurring monthly payments are so powerful. When you know income is arriving next month, you can plan better. You can hire support. You can purchase tools. You can scale properly. But when income constantly changes every month, you stay anxious and you never fully grow. Before this stage, you're still trading time directly for money. Even if you're highly skilled, your earnings remain tied to your hours. But once you own a cash flow machine, income is no longer completely connected to your personal time because the system continues selling, delivering, and repeating itself. This is also the point where your thinking changes. You stop operating like a worker and start operating like an owner. What you're trying to create is meaningful surplus after your life expenses are covered, because surplus is what gets invested. Surplus is what purchases assets. Surplus is what eventually creates freedom. So if your goal is becoming wealthy, your first major milestone should be building a machine that reliably creates surplus. And only a strong cash flow machine creates enough consistent surplus to unlock the fifth and final purchase. Purchase number 5 is ownership. Because once your cash flow machine exists, you finally arrive at the stage most people try to start with, investing. But now investing actually works because you're no longer investing tiny amounts while hoping for miracles. Now you have surplus, and surplus is fuel. This is the point where the wealth journey shifts from making money to preserving and multiplying money. This is where wealthy people spend most of their lives, in ownership. Because ownership does something your salary never can. It gives you the right to collect value from the economy itself. When companies grow, owners benefit. When rents increase, owners benefit. When prices rise, owners benefit. Inflation doesn't only increase living costs, it also increases the revenue flowing through the entire system. That's why owners often stay calm during inflation, while workers feel squeezed from every direction. Now, to simplify this, there's a very clear ownership ladder most wealthy people eventually build once they've created real surplus. The goal is not finding the perfect investment. The goal is stacking ownership from safest to most powerful. And this is usually the order. First, broad index funds, because they represent diversified ownership across the entire economy. You're not gambling on one business, you're buying exposure to the system itself. Second, cash-flowing real estate, but only when the numbers actually make sense. Real estate gives you leverage plus inflation protection, but it also punishes bad calculations extremely hard. Third, business equity, because now you move from owning the overall market to owning specific cash flow engines directly. Higher upside, but also higher risk. And fourth, buying entire businesses. This is the most powerful form of ownership because it gives you control, leverage, pricing power, and cash flow all at once, but it's also the hardest path.